Excuse me, but are you sure you know what you're doing? Alexander Graham's voice was sharp, cutting through the calm of the high-end restaurant. The words were directed at Maya Williams, a young black waitress who had just set down his drink with perfect precision. She stood still for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest, before looking up at him with a steady gaze. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice calm despite the venom in his tone. "I'm sure." The billionaire scoffed, his eyes narrowing in mockery. "Well, I suppose you've never handled anything as delicate as this before, have you? Maybe you should stick to carrying trays instead of making decisions." Maya felt the sting of his words, but she didn't flinch. She had learned long ago that staying composed was often the only power she had. He chuckled to himself, his wealthy colleagues around him joining in the laughter. Maya's face remained neutral, but inside, something shifted. She had dealt with insults her entire life, but this was different. This wasn't just about her, it was about him, too. Alexander Graham, the CEO of one of the world's largest investment firms, had just insulted someone who was more than just a waitress. He had no idea who he was dealing with. Maya had spent years working in silence, hiding her true abilities behind a simple apron and a name tag. What he didn't know was that she wasn't just any employee at the restaurant. She wasn't just there to serve him food and pour his drinks. Maya Williams was a financial consultant, a strategist with a master's degree in economics, and a past that included working for some of the largest financial firms in the world. She had recently signed a contract as the new lead consultant for his company, though he had no idea yet. As Maya turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of Alexander's smug expression in the reflection of the glass window. He was enjoying the power, enjoying the feeling of superiority, and enjoying making her feel small. Little did he know, the tables were about to turn. Maya wasn't going to let his ignorance slide. The next day, she walked into a high-stakes meeting at his company, her presence barely noticed as she slipped into the conference room. She kept her head down, her nerves under control, though her heartbeat raced in anticipation of what was about to happen. The room was filled with some of the most powerful people in the business world, all of them looking to Alexander for direction. Maya had done her homework, and she knew this merger was critical to his company's survival. But she also knew that Alexander's arrogance could be its downfall. As the meeting progressed, Alexander started discussing the details of the deal, oblivious to the potential pitfalls. Maya raised her hand, her voice steady and confident as she spoke. "Excuse me, Mr. Graham, but the clause you're considering could potentially collapse the entire merger. If you sign it as is, the liability falls entirely on your company." Alexander looked at her, his eyebrows raised in disbelief. "And who might you be?" he asked, his tone dripping with disdain. "I'm Maya Williams," she said, her voice clear. "I'm your new lead consultant." The room fell silent. Alexander's face went pale as the realization hit him. He had just humiliated the one person who held the key to his company's future. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Maya stood there, unshaken, as the weight of the moment settled in. She had turned the tables. And Alexander? He had been the one humiliated. As she spoke, the room went quiet, the other executives exchanging uncertain glances. Maya's words rang true, and she could see Alexander slowly absorbing the weight of his mistake. The power dynamic had shifted in that instant. The person he had looked down upon was the one who had the knowledge, the expertise, and the ability to save his empire. As the meeting continued, Alexander's attitude shifted, though he never directly apologized. Maya could feel the respect growing in the room. It wasn't from his apology, it was from the recognition of her expertise, her value, and the realization that she had been right all along. Alexander may have had the wealth and the power, but in that moment, it was Maya who held the true strength. She had made it clear, never judge a book by its cover. Maya Williams wasn't just a waitress. She was a force to be reckoned with. As Maya walked out of the conference room, she could feel the weight of the eyes on her. Executives whispered, some nodding in quiet agreement with what she had just said. But it was Alexander's expression that stuck with her. The disbelief had faded from his face, replaced by a mixture of regret and forced composure. He hadn't said a word since she revealed who she was, but she knew the silence was louder than any apology. Maya's mind was focused, sharp. She didn't need validation from him or anyone else in the room. She had come to do a job, and now it was time to get it done. She made her way to her desk in the company's headquarters, the hum of activity around her not even fazing her anymore. The building was cold, efficient, designed to impress. But she had seen it all before: the marble floors, the polished desks, the gleaming glass windows. None of it mattered. She wasn't here for the decor. She was here to make a difference. Maya sat down and opened her laptop. The contract she had been reviewing the night before lay in front of her, a critical part of the merger. She was about to save this company from a financial disaster, and she wasn't going to let anything or anyone distract her. Hours passed, and the air was thick with focus as Maya went through every detail, every clause. She was lost in the data, in the analysis, until her phone buzzed. It was a text from a number she didn't recognize. She frowned as she opened it. "Can we talk? I owe you an apology." It was from Alexander. She hadn't expected him to reach out. After the way he treated her in the restaurant, she had assumed that was the last time she would ever have to deal with him. But here he was, extending an olive branch in the form of a simple message. Maya stared at the phone for a long moment, weighing her options. She could ignore it, pretend the message didn't exist, or she could respond. The decision was easy. She wasn't going to let his apology, or lack thereof, distract her from the job at hand. But she couldn't ignore the small part of her that wanted to hear what he had to say. "We can meet tomorrow, after work." She typed back. The message was short, businesslike, no emotion attached to it. She hit send, then went back to work, pushing any thoughts of him aside. The next day, Maya arrived at the cafe, her usual routine untouched by the events of the past few days. Alexander was already there, sitting at a corner table, looking out the window. He had chosen a quiet place, away from the corporate buzz, where they could talk without distractions. Maya walked over to him, her steps steady, her expression unreadable. He stood up as she approached, his hands awkwardly placed by his sides. "Maya," he said, his voice softer than she expected. "I just want to apologize for the way I treated you. I was out of line, and I realize now that I misjudged you completely." Maya didn't respond immediately. She studied him for a moment, watching the sincerity, or what seemed like sincerity, in his eyes. After a brief silence, she nodded. "Apology accepted," she said, her tone even. But her words weren't meant to make him feel better. They were simply the truth. She wasn't holding on to the past. She wasn't going to let his previous behavior shape her perception of the future. Alexander sat back down, taking a deep breath. "I've been thinking about everything. You were right. I wasn't prepared for the depth of your expertise, and I should have never underestimated you." Maya sat across from him, her hands folded neatly in front of her. "I'm here to help, Mr. Graham. Nothing more, nothing less. Let's focus on the work." Her voice was calm, but there was an underlying strength in her words. She had made her point, and now it was time to move forward. Alexander nodded, clearly relieved by her straightforwardness. "Of course. I appreciate you giving me a second chance. I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do for the company." Maya didn't smile, but there was a sense of satisfaction in knowing that she had maintained control of the situation. She wasn't here for validation. She was here to prove herself. As they finished their coffee, Maya felt a shift inside her, a quiet sense of pride. She had stood her ground, and now she had the chance to make a real impact. Alexander may have been the one with the money and the power, but it was Maya who held the key to the future of the company. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was someone who could change the course of a business empire. As she left the cafe, the world outside seemed different. It wasn't that anything had physically changed. It was just that she now saw herself as more than what people had assumed. She had broken the mold, and she wasn't going to stop now. The road ahead was long, but Maya was ready for whatever came next. The next few weeks passed in a blur of meetings, strategy sessions, and intense focus. Maya had quickly proven herself to be invaluable to the company, her insights turning what could have been a disastrous merger into a promising partnership. Alexander, though still somewhat distant, began to view her in a new light. The arrogance that once defined his interactions with her had faded, replaced by a begrudging respect. But for Maya, the work was always the priority. She had never sought validation from him or anyone else. It wasn't about proving something to them. It was about proving it to herself. As the merger negotiations progressed, Maya found herself being pulled deeper into the company's inner workings. She had long ago gotten used to being underestimated, to being seen as less than what she truly was. But here, in this high-powered world of finance and corporate deals, she had no intention of staying in the shadows. She was taking her place. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling negotiation session, Maya was sitting at her desk, reviewing the final documents when Alexander walked in. This time, there was no condescension in his steps, no sharp remarks. He simply stood there, his hands in his pockets, watching her for a moment before speaking. "I just wanted to say, you've done more for this company than I could have ever imagined," he said, his voice calm but genuine. Maya didn't look up immediately, but she could feel the shift. She had earned his respect, even if he was too proud to admit it fully. "Thank you," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "But there's still more work to do." He nodded, a small smile forming on his face. "That's what I like about you. You never stop." For the first time, there was no hint of mockery in his tone. Maya knew she had come a long way, but she also knew that her journey wasn't over. She was just getting started. As the weeks turned into months, Maya continued to push forward, her name becoming synonymous with success within the company. The once dismissive whispers that followed her every step had turned into murmurs of admiration. She had become a force to be reckoned with. But despite her growing reputation, there were still those who struggled to see her as more than just the waitress they had once mocked. In a meeting with the company's board of directors, Maya stood in front of them, laying out a new financial strategy that could potentially increase profits by 20%. Some of the men in the room exchanged glances, their skepticism evident. Alexander watched from his seat at the head of the table, his eyes never leaving Maya as she presented her case. One board member, a middle-aged man with graying hair, raised his hand and spoke up. "Ms. Williams, with all due respect, we appreciate your input, but your background doesn't exactly align with the high-level financial strategies we're used to." Maya didn't flinch. She had heard it all before. The dismissal, the doubt, the expectation that she wouldn't be able to handle the pressure. But this time, she was ready. "My background may not be what you expected, but it's the reason I'm here," she said, her voice calm and steady. "I've worked in environments where the stakes were much higher than a quarterly report. I understand risk, strategy, and the importance of taking calculated chances." The room fell silent. Alexander's eyes narrowed, his lips pressed together in concentration. The board member who had spoken seemed to realize that Maya wasn't the same person he had dismissed weeks ago. "What I'm offering," Maya continued, "is a plan that has been tested, a strategy that could change the course of this company's future. But it's up to you whether you choose to listen." The silence stretched on for a few moments before Alexander spoke. "She's right. We're not going to move forward by playing it safe. Let's give her proposal a chance." The board nodded, the decision made. Maya had won. She wasn't just surviving in this world anymore. She was thriving. As she left the boardroom, the weight of her success settled over her like a warm cloak. She had done it. She had proved herself. And for the first time in her life, Maya Williams was no longer invisible. She wasn't just a waitress or a consultant. She was a key player in a multi-billion-dollar empire, and no one would ever look down on her again. As the days passed, Maya found herself becoming more integrated into the world she had once only observed from the sidelines. The meetings, the decisions, the high-stakes negotiations, all of it had become second nature. She was no longer just a consultant. She was a vital part of the company's future. Alexander had shifted in his approach, no longer seeing her as a novelty or a reminder of his previous misjudgments. Now, he saw her as an equal. But Maya didn't let the recognition distract her. She was still focused on the work, still determined to prove that she belonged here, even if she no longer had to fight for respect. One evening, after a particularly long day of reviewing financial forecasts and contracts, Maya sat in her office, staring at the skyline through the large windows. The city lights twinkled like stars, a far cry from the dim, quiet spaces she had once worked in. A knock on the door broke her reverie. She looked up to see Alexander standing in the doorway, holding a folder in his hands. "Got a minute?" he asked, his tone casual, but his expression serious. Maya nodded, gesturing for him to come in. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "I wanted to talk about the upcoming project," he said, taking a seat across from her. "You've been doing incredible work, and I think it's time we take the next step. We need someone to oversee the strategy for the next phase of expansion. I can't think of anyone better suited for it than you." Maya blinked, momentarily stunned by the compliment. She had been focused so intensely on her tasks that she hadn't expected this kind of recognition. I appreciate that, but I'm not sure I'm the right person for this kind of responsibility, she said, her voice steady but hesitant. Alexander leaned forward, meeting her gaze. You are, he said simply. We've seen your results, Maya. You've been more than capable every step of the way. This is just the next logical step. Maya could feel the weight of his words. She had always been the one to question her own abilities, to second-guess herself. But now, with Alexander's words hanging in the air, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she had earned this opportunity. I'll do it, she said after a moment of silence, her voice firm. Alexander smiled, his face lighting up with approval. I knew you would. I'm glad you're on board. As he stood to leave, he paused and turned back to her. One more thing, he added. I know it hasn't been easy for you, being here, especially with the way things started. But I just want you to know that I respect what you've done. More than that, I admire it. Maya's heart skipped a beat, but she quickly masked her surprise with a calm nod. Thank you, Alexander. That means a lot. He gave her a nod of acknowledgement and left the room, the door closing softly behind him. Maya sat there for a long moment, her thoughts swirling. This was it. She had made it. She was no longer just a background player in a world of powerful executives and wealthy investors. She was a key decision-maker, and the future was in her hands. As the night wore on and the office slowly emptied out, Maya gathered her things, ready to head home. She paused for a moment by the window, looking out at the city once more. It was strange, she thought. All this time, she had doubted herself, convinced that she didn't belong in a place like this. But now, with the world at her feet, she realized that the only person who had ever doubted her worth was herself. With that realization came a sense of peace. She was done fighting for a place at the table. She had earned it. The next morning, Maya walked into the office with a renewed sense of purpose. The project that lay ahead was monumental, and it would be her job to guide it to success. As she sat down at her desk, the weight of the responsibility didn't feel like a burden. It felt like an opportunity, one she had more than earned. The following weeks were a blur of late nights, endless meetings, and a relentless focus on the project at hand. Maya's new role as head of strategy came with its challenges, but she had never been more determined. She didn't just want to succeed. She wanted to prove that she had earned her place in this world. Alexander had given her a significant responsibility, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of ownership over her work. The office had become her domain, and she approached each task with the precision and expertise that had gotten her to this point. Despite the respect she had earned from Alexander and the company, there were still those who viewed her as an outsider. At a company event one evening, as Maya made her way through the crowd of executives, she overheard a conversation between two of her colleagues. She's just here because Alexander feels guilty about how he treated her, one said. She doesn't even have the experience to be in charge of something like this. Maya's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't let it show. She had heard these kinds of things before, back when she worked as a waitress, when people assumed they knew her story without ever taking the time to understand it. But now, the words didn't sting the way they once did. She had a job to do, and she wasn't going to let anyone's ignorance hold her back. She took a deep breath, refocused, and walked past them, her head held high. The next morning, Maya entered the boardroom for a meeting with the company's top investors. The tension in the air was palpable, and as she stood at the front of the room, facing a sea of skeptical faces, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the responsibility on her shoulders. This project was make or break for the company, and Maya was the one tasked with leading it to success. She glanced over at Alexander, who sat at the far end of the room. His expression was neutral, but his eyes were locked on her. She knew this was her moment. She could feel the doubt in the room, but she wasn't about to let it undermine her. Gentlemen and ladies, Maya began, her voice steady and clear. This is not just another deal. This is the future of our company. If we move forward, we're not just building a business. We're creating an empire. Her words cut through the tension, and for a brief moment, the room went quiet. She could see a few of the investors exchange looks, but no one interrupted. She continued, her confidence growing with each word. We've done the analysis. We've crunched the numbers. The potential is here, but we have to take calculated risks. This is where we step up and take charge of our future. I've outlined the strategy, and I know it will work." The room shifted as the investors leaned in, some nodding in agreement, others still unsure. Maya could feel the shift in energy, and she pressed on, detailing the plan in full. By the end of the meeting, the once skeptical room was filled with murmurs of approval. Alexander stood up and addressed the group, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "I've seen the numbers," he said, looking around the room. "And I trust Maya's judgment. We move forward with this plan." As the meeting wrapped up and the investors filed out, Maya stayed behind, her heart still racing from the intensity of the discussion. Alexander walked over to her, a small smile on his face. "You did well," he said. Maya met his gaze, her own smile small but genuine. "Thank you," she replied. But it was more than just gratitude. It was acknowledgement. She had done it. She had proven herself to the most important people in the room, and she knew that from now on, no one would doubt her again. As the days turned into weeks, Maya's role at the company grew stronger. She had earned the respect of those who once doubted her, and her strategic decisions were beginning to shape the company's future in ways no one had anticipated. But Maya knew that this success was just the beginning. She had proven her worth, not just to Alexander or the investors, but to herself. The road ahead was long, but Maya Williams was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. She had found her place, and nothing was going to take it away from her. The weeks that followed brought new challenges, but Maya was more than ready. The company had started to thrive under her leadership, and she was no longer just a consultant. She was a key player in shaping the future of the business. Her days were filled with meetings, strategy sessions, and phone calls, but she managed to stay focused, always keeping the bigger picture in mind. Despite her success, there were moments when the weight of her new position felt overwhelming. She had come from nothing, had fought to be seen, and now she was expected to lead. But with every challenge, Maya proved to herself that she had the strength to rise to the occasion. One afternoon, as she walked into the office, she noticed a familiar face in the lobby. It was Clara Hale, the wife of the CEO, Jackson Hale. Maya had met her briefly at a company event, but they had never spoken much. Clara's gaze met Maya's, and she smiled warmly, walking over to her. "Maya, I wanted to congratulate you on everything you've accomplished." "I've been hearing nothing but great things," Clara said, her voice genuine. Maya wasn't used to this kind of praise, especially from someone like Clara. She had heard rumors about the Hale family's expectations of their employees, and she had never felt like she quite fit into their world. "Thank you, Clara. That means a lot," Maya replied, her tone steady but polite. Clara's smile didn't fade. "I know it's not easy, being one of the few women in your position, especially with everything you've had to prove. But you've done it, Maya. You've shown everyone that you belong." Maya was taken aback by her words. It wasn't the kind of praise she expected, especially from someone who, on the surface, seemed so different from her. Clara was from an old money family, and Maya had always felt like an outsider in that world. "I appreciate that," Maya said, though her mind raced with the weight of Clara's compliment. "But I'm just doing my job." Clara chuckled softly. "That's what I love about you. You're humble, but you're also confident in your abilities. It's a rare combination." The conversation shifted to other topics, but Maya couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swell within her. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't just surviving in this world. She was thriving. Later that week, the company hosted a gala to celebrate the success of the merger. It was an extravagant event, filled with the elite of the business world, and Maya knew that she would be expected to attend. As she entered the ballroom, her eyes scanned the crowd, taking in the sea of designer suits and gowns. For a moment, she felt a pang of insecurity. She didn't belong here. But as she made her way to the bar to grab a drink, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in a nearby mirror. She wasn't the same person who had walked into this world months ago. She had grown. She had earned her place. Alexander, who had been deep in conversation with some of the company's investors, noticed her from across the room. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, they simply watched each other. He smiled and excused himself from the conversation, walking over to her. "I almost didn't recognize you," he said with a grin. Maya raised an eyebrow. "Why is that?" "You've changed," he said, a touch of admiration in his voice. "You've come into your own." Maya couldn't help but smile back. "I guess I have." The two stood in silence for a moment, taking in the bustling atmosphere of the event. "You know, Alexander said, his tone more serious now. I've seen a lot of people come and go in this business. But you're different. You've got something they don't. And I think it's what's going to make this company great. Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest at his words. For so long, she had doubted herself. She had fought to be seen, to be heard. But now, standing here, she realized that all those struggles had brought her to this moment. She wasn't just another employee. She was a leader, and she had earned that role. Thank you, Maya said, her voice steady but full of emotion. Alexander smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't just the smile of a boss. It was the smile of someone who genuinely respected her. You've earned it, Maya. You've earned everything. As the evening wore on, Maya found herself surrounded by people who once saw her as nothing more than a waitress or a background figure. But tonight, she was at the center of the conversation. Tonight, she wasn't just an employee, she was a force to be reckoned with. She had fought for her place, and now she was ready for whatever came next. The days that followed the gala were a whirlwind of meetings, emails, and strategy sessions. Maya's new role had fully settled in, and with it, the responsibility of leading her team through the most crucial phase of the company's expansion. She had earned the trust of the executives, and now, her ideas were being implemented at a rapid pace. The sense of purpose she had once longed for had finally become a reality. But with success came new challenges. As the company grew, so did the expectations. There were still some in the office who saw her as an outsider, not truly part of the elite group of executives. She could feel their eyes on her during meetings, their doubt disguised behind polite smiles. It wasn't anything new. Maya had dealt with skepticism her entire life. But now, more than ever, it fueled her desire to prove herself. One afternoon, as she sat in her office reviewing the latest projections, there was a knock at the door. It was Alexander. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "How's everything going?" he asked, his tone casual, but there was a hint of concern in his voice. "It's going well," Maya replied, looking up from her screen. "The team is on track, and the numbers are looking good." Alexander nodded, then paused, his gaze lingering on her for a moment longer than usual. "You're doing great, Maya. I just wanted to make sure you're handling everything okay. You've been under a lot of pressure lately." Maya could see the sincerity in his eyes. She appreciated the gesture, but she wasn't about to let herself show any weakness. "I've got it under control," she said, her voice steady. "This is what I've worked for." Alexander didn't push further, but the look he gave her lingered. It wasn't the look of a boss, but of someone who had come to see her as more than just an employee. It was respect, the kind she had worked so hard to earn. As he left her office, Maya returned to her work, but the brief conversation left a mark on her. For the first time, she realized that Alexander wasn't just the CEO. He was a man who had learned to value her for more than just her ideas. He saw her as an equal. Over the next few weeks, Maya continued to navigate the complexities of her position, balancing the demands of her new role with the high expectations of the company. Her team looked to her for guidance, and she delivered, earning the admiration of her colleagues and the respect of the board. But despite her growing success, there were moments when the pressure threatened to overwhelm her. One evening, as she was working late, Maya found herself staring at the glowing screen in front of her, her thoughts drifting. She had come so far, but the weight of it all was starting to feel heavy. Her phone buzzed, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Clara Hale. "Maya, I hope you're doing well. I was wondering if you'd like to join me for lunch tomorrow. I think it's time we had a real conversation." Maya stared at the message for a moment, unsure of what Clara wanted. The two women had shared a few polite exchanges over the past few months, but they had never really connected. After a moment's hesitation, Maya typed back, "Sure, I'd love to. I'll meet you tomorrow." The next day, Maya arrived at the small cafe where Clara had suggested they meet. Clara was already there, sitting at a table near the window. She looked up as Maya approached, her expression warm and inviting. "Maya, it's good to see you," Clara said, standing up to greet her. They exchanged pleasantries before sitting down. As they ordered lunch, Clara leaned forward slightly, her eyes focused on Maya. "I've been watching you," she said softly. "And I have to say, I'm impressed by how far you've come. You've proven yourself in a way that most people never get the chance to." Maya was taken aback by Clara's words. It wasn't that she wasn't used to praise, but there was something different about the way Clara spoke. It wasn't just a compliment, it was recognition. "Thank you," Maya replied, her voice steady but filled with emotion. It hasn't been easy, but I've learned that the only way to succeed in this world is to prove yourself over and over again. Clara smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. I know that feeling all too well, but I've also learned that sometimes the fight isn't just about proving yourself. It's about knowing when to trust others and allow them to support you. Maya listened closely, intrigued by Clara's words. She had always prided herself on her independence, on the belief that she could do it all on her own. But as Clara spoke, Maya realized that maybe she had been wrong. Maybe the key to true success wasn't in doing everything herself, but in building a network of people who believed in her and in each other. As the lunch continued, Maya found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. The conversation flowed easily, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she wasn't carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders alone. She wasn't just a woman in a corporate world. She was someone with a support system, someone who had earned the trust of those around her. And for the first time, she truly felt like she belonged. The days that followed her lunch with Clara marked a new chapter for Maya. She was no longer just the consultant or the woman fighting for recognition in a world that had once overlooked her. She had built a network, gained allies, and now, more than ever, she felt secure in her position. The weight she had carried for so long seemed lighter, not because the work had become easier, but because Maya knew she wasn't alone anymore. She had support from unexpected places. As the weeks went by, the company's growth continued to outpace expectations, and Maya was at the helm of it all. But even with her increasing influence and success, there were moments when doubts crept in. Despite the praise, despite the respect she had earned, she still had that nagging feeling in the back of her mind. Was it enough? Was she truly part of this world, or was she still just a token of the progress she had fought so hard to achieve? One evening, as Maya sat in her office, going over the latest quarterly report, her thoughts began to wander. She had been at this company for months now, but the world of high-level business, the luxury, the power, it still felt foreign. It wasn't the work that bothered her, it was the constant battle against her own insecurities. The voice that told her she didn't truly belong. She shook the thought away. She had earned this position. She had earned this success. It was time to stop doubting herself. That evening, as she prepared to leave the office, Alexander sent her a text. "We need to talk tomorrow. There's something important I want to discuss." Maya read the message, curiosity piquing her. She knew Alexander well enough to understand that when he wanted to talk about something important, it wasn't just business. The next morning, she arrived early, her mind racing with possibilities. What could this meeting be about? As she walked into his office, she saw him standing by the window, looking out over the city. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Maya," he said, his tone serious. "I've been thinking a lot about the direction of the company, and I need someone I can trust to help lead it forward. You've been an invaluable asset to us, and I believe you're ready for more." Maya felt her heart rate pick up. More? What did that mean? Alexander continued, his eyes meeting hers. "I want you to take on a larger role, a more strategic one. I'm talking about a seat on the board." Maya's breath caught in her throat. A seat on the board? She had always dreamed of a position like this, but the reality of it was overwhelming. She had worked so hard to get here, but now that it was happening, she wasn't sure if she was ready. "Are you sure?" Maya asked, her voice steady but uncertain. "I've never been in a position like that before." Alexander smiled, his expression softening. "I'm sure. I've seen how you handle yourself under pressure. You've got what it takes. You've proven that every step of the way." Maya took a deep breath, the weight of his words sinking in. This was it. This was the opportunity she had worked for. And now, it was within her reach. "I'll do it," Maya said, her voice filled with resolve. Alexander nodded. "I knew you would. I've already informed the board of my decision. We'll make the official announcement next week." As the meeting ended, Maya walked out of the office with a sense of pride she hadn't felt before. This was the next step in her journey, the next challenge she had to face. But this time, she didn't feel afraid. She felt ready. The company had been her battleground, and now it would be her kingdom. With every victory, every challenge she overcame, Maya had built something more than just a career. She had built a legacy, and she wasn't done yet. Maya stood by the window, the soft glow of the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the room. The city outside seemed so distant now, its noise a mere hum in the background as her gaze lingered on the horizon. The reflection in the glass showed her face, calm, composed, yet beneath it, there was a quiet intensity. The weight of her journey had been heavy, but in this moment, she felt light. The company had come so far under her leadership. She had come so far. But the silence of the room spoke louder than any success, any achievement. The air felt cool against her skin, a gentle reminder that the world continued to turn, even when the triumphs and failures were forgotten. Alexander stood across the room, his back to her, looking out over the same view. His presence was familiar now, not the distant authority it once was. He had become someone who trusted her, someone who had seen the strength she carried within. But now, even his silence seemed to fill the room. It wasn't discomfort, nor was it regret. It was the kind of silence that spoke of recognition, of a mutual understanding reached without a single word. As the last of the sunlight faded, the room grew quieter. The hum of the city below seemed to soften, as if the world itself was pausing for a moment, allowing them both to breathe. Maya turned away from the window and walked slowly to her desk. The papers were neatly stacked, the digital files open, ready for the next challenge. But for now, she let them be. The air around her was still. It was as if time itself had slowed, letting the weight of her accomplishments settle deep within her. She didn't need applause or accolades. She had already won. Alexander shifted slightly, his gaze never leaving the window. The faint sound of his footsteps echoed in the stillness as he approached, but Maya didn't move. She didn't need to. There was no need for words anymore. No need for further validation. Their journey had reached its end. Maya could feel it in the way her chest rose and fell with each breath, in the way the room seemed to embrace the moment of quiet reflection. The world outside would keep turning, but in this room, in this moment, they were both suspended in the space between what had been and what would come. And for the first time, Maya felt a peace she had never known before, a peace that came not from external approval, but from the quiet, unwavering strength that had carried her this far. She took one last deep breath, the cool air filling her lungs, and exhaled slowly. The silence between them stretched on, not awkward, but profound. Maya looked out the window one final time, her eyes soft, her shoulders relaxed. She had proven her worth, not just to others, but to herself. And as the city lights flickered to life, filling the horizon with their quiet glow, Maya knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The work, the battles, the doubts, all of it had brought her here. And in the stillness of the evening, Maya felt the weight of it lift, leaving only the quiet certainty that her journey was just beginning.